we try to dig into a car forms training. During that time, I could have forms that I want to cover, as well as I always take open Q&A. So if you've got a form that you've been struggling with, that you came across, that you need help with, whatever that might be, you can always feel free to bring those questions to our open car forms training to ask any questions that you have. Even if I've got forms stipulated for today, like if you look at the training calendar, it says we're going to cover specific forms. I'm always happy to take questions regarding other forms. So we covered, gosh, over the summer, we covered quite a few car forms. We talked about some buyer forms and some seller forms. Today, I'm just going to go back into one of our seller forms just because I had some questions about this week. We're going to talk about our cancellation of listing form just because it's a little bit confusing there. So I just want to cover that real quick just so you're prepared with that document. Let's see, cancellation of listing. We had an agent in our office this week that fell out of contract on the house they were purchasing. They did a contingency for purchase of replacement property. Those sellers refused to do any sort of repairs or improvements to the property, and so they decided to cancel on that one, which gave them the right to cancel on the buyers for their property, as well as it gave them the ability to, they decided they didn't want to list their property for sale, that they were just going to live there. The agent in our office was totally fine with that, with the canceling the listing, because she said they were kind of a bear to work with. So we have this cancellation of listing agreement form. It's got lots of different options. Okay, so this top section up here, cancellation of listing, a form COL. I just wanted to cover this because even when I glanced at it, it was a little confusing to me this week. So keep in mind here, this top line, after you fill in all the information, right, with your client's names, the address, the listing agreement date that's in the upper left-hand corner of the first page of that listing agreement, right? You're going to put in Realty One Group Fox here on the top line. It says broker and principal agree to cancel the listing and terminate their agency relationship, duties, and responsibilities with and to each other, subject to the terms and conditions specified below. Okay, number one is, and you can choose A or B or both, so we could go A or B. Number one is principal agrees to pay broker the amount of compensation specified in the listing. Okay, so if we're going with one, it's, hey, the principal's agreeing to pay the broker the amount of compensation that's in that listing agreement. So whatever percentage you put in there, but we have to check one of these boxes for this to be valid. Otherwise, it's not got any terms to which that was going to happen. So the first one is if prior to the end of the listing period, so let's say our listing period goes until December 31st, and today is September 25th, we're canceling this listing agreement. So this is saying, hey, we're canceling it. We're relieving of our duties, like we're taking the property off the market. But A is if by the end of the listing period specified in the listing or any extension, so in my example, this would be December 31st, principal enters into a contract to sell, convey, lease, or otherwise transfer the property. Okay, so this is, hey, even though we're canceling the listing and we're saying we're done, right, that we're not going to continue to market the property for sale, you still can't sell the property during the term of our listing agreement. We're relieving each other of our duties, but we're not relieving of the obligation of that listing period. So if they decided to sell the property at any time between now and December 31st, we would still be due the commission for that. Okay, so that's how A reads. B is, or within blank calendar days after the cancellation of listing or the listing period specified in the listing, principal enters into contract to sell, convey, lease, or otherwise transfer the property to any person named below or that person's related entity who, after the commencement of the listing and prior to this cancellation, physically entered and was shown the property by broker or cooperating broker or submitted to seller a signed written offer to acquire, lease, exchange, obtain, an option on the property. Okay, so first A is a broad statement. If you sell this property to anybody during the term of the listing period, so between now and December 31st, let's say that our listing period ended on September 30th. Okay, let's say it ended a little soon. Now you're like, well, okay, so if you sell it the rest of this month, then I'm due a commission. So we might check A for that. And then we decide, well, for anybody who saw the property or who previously wrote an offer, the whole idea here is that we don't want a seller receiving an offer on their property or coming into contact with some potential buyers during their showing and say, hey, it's okay, I'll cancel my listing agreement. You cancel your buyer representation agreement. We'll do this without our agents. Okay, we're trying to eliminate them circumventing us as part of that process because we did the hard work to get people there. So maybe if we end on September 30th, maybe we're saying, hey, within 90 calendar days after the cancellation of this listing, right? If it's going to end sooner, or let's say, if it was ending December 31st, instead of checking this box, we might check this box, the listing period specified in the listing, right? Principal, but this is really designed if we're going to check both boxes that we are extending this for the people who saw the property while we had it on the market. So A is if anybody buys it during the term of the listing agreement, in my second example, that would be till the end of this month. And then we're going to say, hey, within 90 days after, if anybody who has shown the property by a broker or cooperating broker, or anyone who expressed interest, here's their names below, right? So enters into contract to sell, lease, or otherwise transfer the property to any person named below, that person's related entity who, after the commencement of the listing, the beginning of the listing, and prior to this cancellation, physically entered and was shown the property by broker or cooperating broker, or submitted to seller a signed written offer to acquire, lease, exchange, or obtain an option on the property. We need to list names here. Without listed names here, this B means absolutely nothing, no matter which box you check. Okay, so the way section 1 reads, just A and B. A, if we check that box, blanket statement. If anybody at any time makes an offer on this property, and you enter into contract during the term of the listing period, whatever that might be. Okay. If we don't check this box, we have B. And again, we can check A and B. And this is saying, hey, within blank number of calendar days after the cancellation of the listing, these people listed. So this is more specific. Instead of being broad and being anyone who purchases, it's going to be, hey, just people who saw the property while we had it listed, I would be due a commission for that. Okay. Now this gives us days after the listing agreement. So let's say it expired at the end of this month. This extends it for another 3 months after that. But we could mark during the listing period specified. So, right, so you've got 3 options here. You've got the broad until the end of the listing period. You've got the specific blank number of calendar days after the listing period, or specific during the listing period. So if our listing expired on December 31st, we could check this box here and then put our list of names here of people who saw the property. We could also say see attached list. So it might be in your best interest as people schedule to see the property that you ask them what the last names of their buyers are. And you can always just put a caveat in there. That way, if they contact me directly, I know whose clients they belong to, and I can redirect them back to you as their agent, right? Whatever that might be. But get the list of names of people seeing those properties when you have them for sale to protect yourself in the case that a seller decides to cancel the listing. Because, right, so, and you'd probably want to put a date there, dated 9/25/2025, right? Okay, this is just saying that, hey, during the term of the listing period, right, even though we're canceling the actual listing, we're not going to market this property for sale anymore. Our listing technically went through the end of the year. Okay, and anybody who saw this property up to this point, here's that list. If they decide to purchase the property between now and the end of the year, between now and our expiration, I would be due a commission. Okay, so that's how 1A and B works. Any questions about that? Because it's a little confusing, I feel like, when you're tackling this form. Okay, there's other options, just so you know, we don't have to go with section 1 at all. So in the event the transaction specified in A or B above, broker has no obligation to represent the principal in such transaction. So, right, we're canceling our obligations of representation. The property itself is still in contract. So they could enter into contract to sell the property to one of the people on the list. We don't have to represent the seller of the property anymore, but we're still due a commission. Okay, that's what that's saying. And then compensation is payable on close of escrow if completion of the transaction is prevented by default of the seller or seller's default. Okay, so those are the two, either close of escrow or if the seller prevents the close of escrow. So that would be section 1. We're still going to be due the commission as listed in our listing agreement under these circumstances. Any questions about section 1? Um, Yes, technically, anybody who saw the property during the time that it was listed, Shauna, would count. So somebody who passed through an open house would absolutely count. And therefore, you want to make sure that you've got, everybody should be signing in. Obviously, they should be signing the Ohana form, um, or a variation of that, just stating that, hey, I'm not your agent, but you're viewing this property. I'm working on behalf of the seller. So yeah, absolutely. And if somebody else hosts an open house for you, if you're allowing somebody else, you can let them know that, hey, I just need the names of people who passed through the open house. During the open house, I need a name of each party that passed through. No, I don't need their contact information. No, I'm not going to reach out to them, but I just need a list so I have an accurate picture of who has seen the property during the term of the listing agreement. So yeah, absolutely. Anybody who saw it during the open house. All right, moving on to number 2. So option 1, again, is the commission as specified in your listing agreement. Now, let's say that you want to amend that agreement, right? We have agreed to X if I sell the property for you. They're canceling the listing agreement. 2 allows us to modify that percentage. So you could say principal agrees to pay broker. It's not going to let me put anything in there because I'm not going to put a number, because then I would be in breach of the rules and regulations. But let's say that this is commission. We decided instead of X, we're willing to reduce our commission to Z, right? Or to Y, right? So this would be principal agrees to pay broker blank percentage of the listing, or if applicable, sales price, whichever is greater. If prior to the end of the listing period specified in the listing or any extension, principal enters into a listing agreement for the sale or lease of the property with another real estate broker, and principal enters into a contract to sell, convey, lease, or otherwise transfer the property during the listing period specified in the listing or any extension. Okay, that's saying that, hey, if they sell the property, they enter into contract to sell, or if they enter into an agreement with another broker. So, right, if they enter, clarify. This is, we've entered into an agreement with another broker to sell the property, and we entered into contract to sell the property during the period that was specified in the listing agreement. I would be due this commission. So you might want to reduce it down to like a fraction of what you were taking if you had done all the marketing and everything for the property when the buyer was brought in. Okay, principal agrees to notify the other real estate broker the compensation obligation of this paragraph and pay such broker such compensation upon close of escrow. Compensation is payable upon close of escrow or completion of the transaction, or if the completion of the transaction is prevented by the seller on seller's default. Okay, so this allows us to do a reduced. It allows them to go ahead and list with another broker, knowing that we need to get a little bit of money back. So why is this important? Well, maybe let's say you put a lot of money into marketing, you paid for photos, you paid for pre-listing inspections. You want to get this property, you realize that there might be somebody else that can get this property sold. So we're going to reduce our commission to Y% and let somebody else list the property. Okay. That's how that would roll. We would still get a percentage of it to help us recoup our costs, but it would be up to somebody else to get the property sold. Okay. So that's option number 2. Okay. So keep in mind that if we check like here, We can also check here, okay? Because this is, hey, if end of the prior of the listing agreement, principal enters into contract to sell, convey, or lease or otherwise transfer the property, I would be due a commission. But we might say, hey, that if they list it with another brokerage, right? If prior to the end of the listing period specified in the listing or any extension, they enter into an agreement with another real estate broker, I would take a reduced commission. Okay, so you could have both boxes checked. Okay, or you could say, like, hey, if within the term of the listing period, anybody who saw the property, I'm due that full commission that was in that listing agreement. But if we relist the property and somebody else purchases it, then I'm due this commission. Okay, so you can have 1 and 2 checked. 3 is a flat rate. Principal agrees to pay broker blank for out-of-pocket expenses, costs incurred, and services rendered in marketing the property prior to cancellation of listing. Now, if you're going to check this box, I would make sure in my listing agreement, when I send it out for initial signatures on that listing agreement, that I have my cancellation terms in that listing agreement so they know up front that, hey, if this property does not sell for any reason, seller is responsible to reimburse broker for costs incurred, including things like home inspections, photos, whatever that might be. Okay. And you may even want to put a dollar amount there so they know what to expect. So that when you come in here and put, hey, I'm due $1,500 for my out-of-pocket expenses, cost incurred, services rendered in marketing the property prior to cancellation of listing. Now, keep in mind that photos are part of marketing, as is a pre-sale inspection. That's all part of marketing. Okay. So you can check multiple boxes. Okay. Now, if we come down here, notice this box here, number 4, is now white. It's not blue. I can't check that box because this is the box that says, hey, we're done. We're ending our thing. Principal owes no compensation to broker. We can't have any of the other boxes checked. So we would have to uncheck that one and that one and that one. Oh, hold on. I've still got this box checked. There we go. Now I can check this box here that principal owes no compensation to broker. So if we're terminating our listing agreement, as was like the agent that was in our office this week that was canceling, she said, I don't want anything to do with these people. There's no way that whatever, I just want to be done. We would just check this box. Hey, we owe no compensation. Okay. You could say, hey, we're just principal agrees to pay broker. So maybe we just have some out-of-pocket expenses. Maybe we paid for photos. Those were some expensive photos. All right. I just put 3,500. So, right, for out-of-pocket expenses prior to cancellation of the listing. As soon as that's paid, then the listing's officially canceled. So that would be the termination of it as well if we don't check boxes 1 or 2. Now we're getting compensated for our out-of-pocket expenses, but we're releasing the seller from their obligation. Okay. And then as always with our car forms, they like to give us the other line, and we can check any of the boxes plus the other, except for this number 4. There's no other stipulations, no other points of this contract that can go along with number 4. Did this make sense to everyone? Do we have any other questions regarding this cancellation of listing form? All right. We are a quiet group. Let's see here. We covered, I was just looking at what else was in here. We do have the cancellation of contract form as well. So just so you know, when you're in here in your car forms and you're editing, if I come down here, here's all of the forms that are already in my transaction, this bottom section here. If I can either click the little dots and drag it up, or I can just come over here. Hold on, now I got to find it. And hit the little plus button, and that will add it up to my workspace as well. So now that's in there. The other question that I've gotten a lot lately is that when we go to open a, so let's say I close out of this one, I'm going to hit back. Yeah, let's save our changes. It's going to take us back. Sometimes it takes me back too far. That's all right. hold on, because I just want to see, because I've had a lot of questions regarding this when it comes to zip forms as well. So I'm just gonna point it out that oftentimes when we go to open up a form to do some editing on it, it's going to ask you if you want to open your previous workspace or start a new workspace. And if we start a new workspace, whatever the forms are that are selected, it's going to pull those into our new workspace. If we say, hey, we want to open the previous workspace that included that form, it's going to open all of the forms that were included with that form last time we were working on it. So it's actually a really convenient feature. Let's say that I was working on a, uh, see if it'll do it, if it'll prompt me. Let's say that I was working on an offer for a buyer and I had pulled over even a listing and I had pulled over the listing agreement and some of the blanket disclosures and such already pulled in for editing. And then I was waiting for some information from my sellers before I could finalize that listing agreement and send it out for signatures. I can close out of there. All I have to do is come back, click on that listing agreement to go to edit it. And when I go to edit it, it's going to say, hey, do you want to start a new workspace with just the cancellation of listing? Or do you want to open the previous workspace that had the cancellation of listing and the cancellation of contract? So if I go, oh, let's open that previous workspace, not only is it going to pull all those forms back in, but it's going to fill them in just like I had already started editing them previously. So it's a really cool feature. So if you're like, what does that mean? I don't understand this. That's what the difference is between previous workspace versus new. So most of the time we're going in there, we're picking up a new form, we're going into a new workspace, we're going to edit it and make it a new form. But sometimes we get stopped in the middle of our work. We can close out of this, go back, click on it. You're not going to lose everything. Open that previous workspace and it's going to pull it over. And again, all we have to do is select one of those forms that was in that previous workspace for it to give us that option. All right, so now I have my cancellation of listing and my cancellation of contract. So I was just going to talk real quick about the cancellation of contract, disposition of deposit, and cancellation of escrow. So because I get this question a lot, this is probably one of the biggest questions that I ever get people texting me or calling me about is, hey, I've got to cancel this contract. Is this okay? And a lot of times what they do is they come down here and they check the other line and they say, because this property fell out of contract. Okay, right? So maybe we're canceling on the buyers. Maybe this is the seller canceling on the buyers because the property they were purchasing fell out of contract, right? So this, they can, because we have a contingency or we have a seller's purchase. No, okay, hold on. We have a contingency for the sale of the buyer's property. No, that would be wrong. We have the seller's purchase of replacement property as part of our sale contract. Okay, the property that we're selling to another buyer, we have the seller's purchase of replacement property, the SPRP in place, making the sale of the property contingent on them purchasing that replacement property. So that does, as long as we filled it out correctly, it gives us the right to cancel on our buyer of the listing if our seller fails to complete the purchase of their purchase forward. Okay. So we can cancel because the property fell out of contract, but this is not the right way to do it. Okay. We don't want to fill in other. It's very rare that we fill in other. Unless maybe we're like, it's mutual, then we might, there's not even an other line there. So it's very rare you're ever going to fill in other. So if you call me and tell me what you put in the other line, I'm probably going to tell you you're wrong. Okay. We always or almost always want to take this number one up here as permitted by good faith exercises of paragraph blanks of the agreement. Okay. And I'll show you where to find that information here in just a second. Our other options are buyer has failed to remove the applicable contingency or taken the contractual action after being given a notice to perform. So that happens often when it's our seller cancellation. So usually sellers don't cancel is permitted. They're usually, hey, we served a notice to perform. Buyer has failed to perform. So this is often when it's a seller cancellation here. And remember, we got to serve that notice to perform. We got to wait 2 days. So if I serve that notice to perform today, which is Thursday, tomorrow is day 1, Saturday is day 2. Technically, I should be able to cancel at the end of the day on Saturday, but because it's a weekend, it actually rolls to Monday. I can't cancel till the end of the day on Monday because anytime a performance day lands on a weekend, so the weekend days count, but the performance day rolls to the next business day. So just kind of keep that in mind, right? You've got sellers failed to remove a contingency or take contractual action after the buyer has given notice, or the other party has failed to close escrow after being given a demand to close escrow. Demands to close escrows are 3 days. Notice to performs default to 2 days. Okay, so most of the time it's, hey, we're canceling based on the good faith exercise of this paragraph of the agreement. So let's come down here and find a purchase agreement. I'm not sure I actually even have one in here, but that's, oh, I do. All right, so we're just going to add this purchase agreement in just by clicking that little plus. So anytime I'm canceling this contract, I'm going back to my purchase agreement and I'm looking at my grid. Okay, and the grid is the first 3 pages of that purchase agreement. These fluff forms don't count as the actual pages, right? So here's my grid right here. Hold on, I paused. It is frozen. There we go. All right. So we have our grid in here. Most reasons that we can cancel under the contract are going to be found inside of this grid. Okay, and this is usually why we give the notice to perform. It could be that you countered. Okay, so right, here's the sale of the buyer's property. I don't think the SPRP is actually even mentioned in here. I'm surprised it's not. But that's okay. So usually what happens is we usually counter on that measure. Okay, but let's see if we can find. So what we would want to do then is we're going to find that SPRP form, which is our seller's purchase of replacement property. Statewide. Okay, here's our seller's purchase of replacement property. Just so you know, anytime you're accepting a contract on a listing where the seller's purchasing forward, you need to make sure it's noted in that contract or on the counter offer that it is contingent on the seller purchasing another property. I was just looking because I was thinking it's somewhere in here, but I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it under that section. You would want it under other terms, or again, oftentimes it just gets countered, and it's probably countered because it's not in here. Probably should bring that to their attention. Natural hazard zone excluded. I'm just double checking. Sale of buyer's property, but not. All right, nope. All right, so let's come in here to our seller's purchase of replacement property. So what we would do is, this is form SPRP. We're going to find in here the paragraph where it talks about our cancellation. That if seller's replacement property is in or enters escrow, there is another agreement, or there is another agreement, and either part of that escrow agreement gives notice of cancellation. Seller within 2 days thereafter should give buyer written notice of that cancellation. Oh, here we go. Seller's right to cancel. If prior to removing the seller's removal of the finding replacement property contingency, seller is unable to enter into contract. We were in contract, let's say, but we couldn't close contract. So it would be 6B here. Seller is unable to close escrow on replacement property according to the contract. So this would be 6B. So when I come to my cancellation of contract, up here on this first thing, I'm going to say SPRP 6B. Okay, I'm canceling this contract on my buyers for my property as permitted by good faith exercise of paragraphs 6B of the agreement, right? And I'm referencing that it's 6B of the SPRP, or the seller's purchase of replacement property. That's giving me the rights to cancel. So that's the the proper way to cancel anything is going to be to find that paragraph in either the purchase contract or the addendum, whatever that other form is that you included, and use that to cancel. Don't put it under other terms. Okay, outside of giving the seller or the buyer notice to perform, we want to cancel as good faith exercise of a paragraph in the contract because that's saying that, hey, we have the right to cancel. Ultimately, that means that the buyer should get their deposit back. Okay. Now, the other terms might be that like buyers decided they don't want to purchase the property. Like, so maybe we're going to go buyers canceling and maybe they've removed all their contingencies. They actually have no real right to cancel at this point, but they're going to say, hey, buyer lost job, can't complete purchase. Right? That might be the appropriate use for the other terms. We don't have a right in the contract to cancel. We've removed all of our contingencies. We didn't give the seller a notice to perform, but our buyer really can't complete the purchase because they no longer have a job. Okay. Then I would come down here, this bottom section. Okay. So it's usually one party cancellation. It's very rare. It's mutual cancellation. Then we're going to come down here to the second section for the disposition of deposit. In that one, because my buyer's in breach, I'm going to say, yeah, we can cancel, but the seller's going to get to retain your deposit. Are you going to be okay with that? And they're going to be like, yeah, are you sure? Because I could really use that $3,000. I know, but unfortunately, we removed all your contingencies. Are you okay with releasing that to the seller? And he's going to be like, yeah, sure. So we're going to say, hey, buyer releases buyer's deposit to seller, less seller's fees and costs already occurred, agreed to in the contract, paid through escrow, right? Pursuant, right? So that would be we're releasing the deposit back. Now this gets confusing because they include all this terminology in here of like less fees and costs. So if the buyer's canceling because they have the right to cancel, then it'd be, hey, seller authorizes the release of the buyer's deposit back to the buyer, less buyer's fees and costs. And what does that mean? For the most part, there are no fees and costs incurred by either party when we cancel. Title and escrow just take a loss. They don't charge fees. Some title and escrow companies and other places in other states, they might charge a fee. Maybe there's a cancellation fee or like a title search fee that they're going to retain part of that deposit for doing the work. For the most part, Northern California, we don't have that where it comes into play. So for the most part, it's just to be like either seller authorizes the release of the buyer's deposit back to buyer, less buyer's fees and costs, or the buyer authorizes the release of the buyer's deposit to the seller, less seller's fees and costs. Okay. You could do a partial release. That's down here on 3 is, hey, maybe we've got, $5,000 held in escrow for the deposit and we're releasing half of that to the sellers. Maybe we negotiated something on their behalf, or maybe there's no deposit in escrow. Okay. So that's kind of how this works. Okay, on this cancellation form. So I just wanted to go over that because this is the main question I get is, hey, is it okay to put this here? Well, no, if you can cancel and you're trying to get the buyer's deposit back ultimately, or you're a seller and trying to cancel, because if we aren't permitted as part of a contract to cancel, ultimately the other party, even though it's breach of contract, it's already pre-negotiated if you've initialed the liquidated damage clause that the deposit goes to the seller and that's their damages. If a seller cancels on a buyer, the buyer can turn around and sue for a specific performance. Technically, either party can. You don't see it as much done by sellers, but you can do it as a buyer that, hey, no, you said you were selling this property. We've entered into contract. We've got the ball rolling. We've got inspections done. We want to purchase this home. Like, this is the home we're purchasing. The seller can't just cancel on a buyer. The contract prohibits them from doing so. They can't just on a whim be like, we're done. Buyer can go after them and sue for specific performance and basically force them to sell the property. So anytime somebody cancels, we want to make sure that we can reference the contract portion that allows them to be able to cancel. Okay, so in this case, it was the SPRP section 6B, which said that it was not just finding the replacement property, but it was closing escrow on that replacement property. So we would reference that on here, letting them know that, hey, we had the right to cancel. This was something you agreed to, and we did not close escrow on this property. So we want to reference that to make sure that there's less disputes over deposits or over legal issues. Questions on that form? All right. Now, keep in mind, we had that residential purchase agreement pulled up, and I said there were fluff forms on there. Don't take those fluff forms away from your form. So on our buyer representation agreements, our BRBCs, on our purchase agreements or the RPAs, and on our listing agreements, there are different forms attached at the beginning and at the end of those forms. So our California residential listing agreement has, hold on, I'm just going to eliminate some of the other forms. Okay. It has our agency disclosure. So you'll see this form on the California Residential Purchase Agreement. You'll also see it on your BRBC and your listing agreements. It's attached. It has to get signed anytime we send those forms out. And this is just disclosing up front the different ways that somebody could be represented in a transaction. Either there's seller's agents, there's buyer's agents, there's agents that represent both. And here's everybody's duties. Everybody signs that one. So they'll sign it when they sign. If you're working with a buyer, they're going to sign it when they sign their BRBC. They're going to sign again every time they make an offer. Okay. That's all that you'll see at the beginning. They used to take all of these, what I call fluff forms, and put them at the beginning. And now they, last year, I think it was last year, probably last December, they fixed it so that only the agency disclosures at the beginning, everything else is at the end. So if we scroll to the end of our purchase agreement, which you'll see here is 17 pages. So we're going to just keep on scrolling down. We're almost to the end. All right, here's our last page. After the purchase agreement, then we go into a buyer's investigation advisory, advising the buyer of the importance of investigation, the different types of investigations they may want to do. Okay, now you'll see a similar form on the listing agreement as well, but it's directed at sellers. The next form that you'll see is our possible representation of more than one buyer or seller disclosure and consent. You see this on the listing agreement and the purchase agreement. Just saying that, hey, we might be working with multiple buyers or multiple sellers at the same time. We're not going to, just because you're writing an offer on a property, I'm not going to prevent somebody else from writing an offer on that same property. Or just because I have your property listed doesn't mean I'm not going to show buyers other properties, right? That we're going to market them and work them all the same. Talks again, dual agency in a transaction. It also mentions here that offers aren't necessarily confidential, that unless we've signed a non-disclosure agreement with the seller of a property, that seller can disclose information regarding that offer to other people. If you're going to send out a non-disclosure agreement to be signed, please don't send it over with your offer. If you send it over with your offer, the seller now has the offer in hand. They can review the offer. They can share the details of that offer because they actually haven't signed that NDA yet. So make sure that you send over the NDA first before you send over an offer. But anyways, that's your possible representation of more than one buyer or seller. You've got your fair housing and discrimination advisory, just right. There's protected classes. As real estate agents, as realtors, we're not allowed to discriminate on any of the protected classes. Okay. And it just outlines that in this form to remind them of that. Examples of positive practices. There's some examples of improper conduct, and there's where to go if you feel like you've been discriminated against. You've also got your buyer homeowners insurance advisory, right? We're trying to push our buyers. We used to, back in the day, we'd get in a contract on a property, everything be rolling along. We do inspections, we do appraisals, we've got the loan rolling. And then in like the last it'd be the last week of the contract because the closing disclosure used to go out and they needed the insurance information for the closing disclosure. We'd have buyers scrambling to get insurance, 5 days prior to the close of escrow so they can get it over to the lender, they could get the closing disclosure, they could sign and close on the property. It's changed, right? We know it's hard, especially in California, to get homeowners insurance. So now we're saying, hey, you need to make sure this is actually a contingency of the contract now, because it's so important that you investigate the possibility of getting insurance on the property. And not only that, but making sure that that the coverage amount, that the premium that you have to pay on an annual basis is a acceptable premium, and that it's going to help you, it's not going to hinder you from qualifying for that loan. I've seen insurance policies upwards of $17,000. Okay. So and that's on a yearly basis, which is over $1,000 a month. So just kind of keep that in place. And then sometimes some of our insurance carriers want to do a physical inspection of the property before they will insure it. So we need to make sure that there's enough time to do that. So this is what that form covers, that, hey, you should early on in this transaction investigate your insurance options, make sure you've got coverage that is acceptable to you. Okay, so that's the homeowner's insurance advisory form. There's also, see, there's like so many fluff forms in here. They're important forms. I just call them fluff because they're not the main attraction of this form group. You've got your wire fraud and electronic funds transfer advisory, just making sure that they don't send money to random people. I've had people, I actually know of people that have wired all of their funds for closing to someone that was not the title company, because they were told, hey, you need this much money to close escrow on the house that you're purchasing. Please wire it over. Here's the wiring instructions, and it was gone. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind. As well, I always let people know that anytime they receive something saying they should wire funds, they need to call their title company. Here's the direct number for the title company. Here's your escrow number. Verify that they've asked for it. They're the only people you're going to send money to. Okay. And then you've got your California Consumer Privacy Act disclosure and information form, just saying that, hey, there's certain things we can control, certain things that we cannot control. Like we cannot control the information that's disseminated about the house that you just purchased. After the close of escrow, there might be photos online, there might be information about the home, there might be the sales price online. Like we just can't control that. So that's your California Consumer Privacy Act and advisory disclosure and notice. So those are the forms that are attached to your purchase agreement. Again, don't ever take those off the purchase agreement and have a buyer not sign them, even if they've already signed them with the first 3 offers they wrote that weren't accepted. Just have them sign them again. That way you're all on the up and up, and it's more work to take them off than it is to leave them on. Any questions about any of those forms? Alrighty. Then if there's no other forms questions, that's all I've got for you today. Just wanted to make sure that we covered those cancellations because I've been getting a lot of questions about those forms. Fabulous. Well, thanks everyone for joining me today. We will be back next week. Let's see what we're covering next week. Give me just a second. Let's see here. See if Abby beats me to it. Um, oh, here we go. Lead generation to increase sales starts in October. So next Thursday, we're going to talk about lead generation. So we'll talk over the beginning of October. We'll talk about just what lead generation is, how to follow up with those people that you talk to and connect with through lead generation, what kind of follow-up plan they should be on. We'll cover that next week. And then we'll talk about some specific types of lead generation strategies, whether it be open houses or social media or whatnot. If you have lead generation options that you would like me to cover as part of that series, let me know. We'll be doing car forms training on the 30th of October, and somewhere in there, just pay attention because I'm going to squeeze in some Business planning. Okay, we want to squeeze in business planning in October for 2026. It might be that last week of October, but stay tuned for that. We'll have a couple of extra classes worked in to talk about business planning, setting yourself up for success going into 2026. All right, so thanks everyone for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a fabulous day. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Amy.
You're welcome.
Have a good day.
You as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Taryn.